In medicine, we put a lot of faith in numbers. They feel solid, objective. But what if I told you one of the most important numbers in sleep medicine isn't really a number at all? At least, not in the way we think. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on how sleep apnea is really diagnosed. So let me ask you a question. When you think about a sleep study, what comes to mind? You probably have a pretty clear picture of how it all works, right?
For most of us, we imagine getting hooked up to a bunch of wires. A machine hums along all night, and then, poof, it prints out a report that says, yep, you've got it, or nope, you're all clear. It seems so simple, so automated.
But what if that's not the whole story? Not even close. What if the final diagnosis doesn't come from some fancy algorithm, but from hundreds of tiny, expert judgment calls made by a highly trained person? See, this whole complex world of sleep medicine often boils down to one single, incredibly powerful number. It's the metric that everyone, doctors, insurance companies, you name it, focuses on. A patient's entire diagnosis can be summed up with a number that looks super precise, something like 28.3. That's the apnea-hypopnea index, or AHI. It's the average number of times your breathing gets interrupted every hour while you sleep. But where in the world does a number like 28.3 actually come from? To figure that out, we have to look at what the machine is really doing. And here's the first surprise. It's not diagnosing a thing. It's just a data collector. It's recording hours and hours of raw signals from your body, a huge, messy tapestry of waveforms and patterns. And inside that data, we're looking for two main culprits. First, you've got obstructive apnea. That's where your airway is physically blocked, but your body is still trying really hard to breathe. Then there's central apnea, which is totally different. That's when your brain just forgets to send the signal to breathe. All effort stops. Distinguishing between the two isn't about just seeing if the air stopped. It's about interpreting those effort signals. And that's something a machine just can't do reliably by itself. And that, right there, is where the hidden hero of this whole story comes into play, the human analyst. This is the absolute heart of it. The machine is just a fancy recording device. It's a person, a trained professional, who has to wade through all that data, all those squiggly lines, and find the clinical meaning buried in all that noise. And this person has a name, a registered polysomnographic technologist, or RPSGT for short. These are certified experts who spend their days meticulously reviewing every single second of a sleep study. They're basically the translators between the raw data and a real diagnosis. So what are they actually doing? Well, it's fascinating. They're not just counting. They're making hundreds of nuanced judgment calls, all based on a very complex set of rules. It's like being a detective for your sleep. Okay, so take a classic apnea. The rule is pretty clear. Airflow drops by 90% for at least 10 seconds. Easy enough. But is it obstructive or central? That decision comes down entirely to how the scorer interprets those effort signals. It's a judgment call, not a machine measurement. And then you have hypomnias, which are way trickier. A hypomnia is a partial blockage. It's a 30% drop in airflow for 10 seconds, and this is the key part, it only counts if it's linked to either a drop in your blood oxygen or a tiny wake-up signal in your brain. The scorer has to connect the dots between two different events. Think about this. For every single potential hypopnea, the scorer runs through a mental checklist. First, what's the patient's normal breathing look like? Second, okay, I see a dip. Is it at least 30%? Third, did it last 10 seconds? Fourth, now, can I find a matching oxygen drop or brain arousal right around the same time? And fifth, was that a real event, or did the patient just roll over? Now imagine doing that hundreds of times for an entire 8-hour night of sleep. So all of those individual decisions, all of these hundreds of little micro judgments, they all get tallied up. And that's what creates that one final all-important number. And here's the formula for the AHI. It's the total number of apneas and hypopneas, every single one identified by that human score, divided by the hours of sleep. This means the very building blocks of this formula aren't machine outputs, they're human decisions. This quote just hits the nail on the head. The AHI isn't like taking your temperature. It's not a raw measurement. It's a number that is painstakingly constructed by an expert analyst through a process of interpretation and hundreds of individual decisions. So you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but why does it really matter? Well, it matters a ton, Because those small, sometimes subjective decisions made by the scorer have enormous, real-world consequences for the patient. Just look at these categories. An AHI under 5 is considered normal. From 5 to about 15 is mild, 15 to 30 is moderate, and anything over 30 is severe. A patient's entire medical reality can flip depending on which side of these lines their final number happens to land. So let's play this out. Imagine a scorer is on the fence about a few borderline events throughout the night. A few calls go one way, and the patient's final AHI is 14, mild sleep apnea. A few calls go the other way, and the AHI is 16, moderate sleep apnea. It's just a 2-point difference. What does that really change for the patient? Well, just about everything. Crossing that single line from mild to moderate can be the difference between your insurance covering CPAP therapy or not. It can determine if you're a candidate for surgery. For pilots, for truck drivers, it can literally mean the difference between being medically cleared to work or being grounded. That 2-point swing changes the entire treatment path. So, to bring this all together, we really need to rethink what a diagnosis like this is. Sleep apnea isn't just a physical condition. In the medical world, it's a diagnosis that is actively constructed by an expert. And let's leave it with this key idea. That final HEI number isn't simply calculated by a machine. It is constructed, piece by piece, through expert human analysis. It's a perfect blend of technology and human expertise. And that leaves us with a bigger question to think about. We put so much trust in machines and data, and for good reason. But this whole process reveals this critical hidden human element right at the heart of it all. So it makes you wonder, where else in our lives is the most important part of the equation not the number itself, but the hidden human mind that put it all together?